ولا ينفقون نفقة صغيرة ولا كبيرة ولا يقطعون واديا إلا كتب لهم ليجزيهم الله أحسن ما كانوا يعملون وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله. الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا وأن الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة أعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما. ويدعو الإنسان بالشر دعاءه بالخير وكان الإنسان عجولا. وجعلنا الليل والنهار آيتين فمحونا آية الليل وجعلنا آية النهار مبصرة لتبتغوا فضلا من ربكم ولتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب وكل شيء فصلناه تفصيلا. وكل إنسان ألزمناه طائره في عنقه ونخرج له يوم القيامة كتابا يلقاه منشورا. اقرأ كتابك كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا. من اهتدى فإنما يهتدي لنفسه ومن ضل فإنما يضل عليها ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى وما كنا معذبين حتى نبعث رسولا. جزاك الله خير.
تكبير تكبير تكبير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inshallah, without further delay, I'd like to call upon our dear beloved Shaykh Omar Hussaini to deliver the opening remarks and begin with his opening talk. As Shaykh Omar makes his way up to the stage, I do want to announce one more time, for any fasting brothers, there is a light outside for the fasting brothers, because dinner will be served a little later, around 9:30. Inshallah. So if there are any fasting brothers, please make your way outside and grab your iftar to try yourself up until dinner, inshallah.
الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد دائما أبدا. So I wanted to open this weekend's conference by providing a little bit of context on why we chose the topic and some of the thinking that went behind putting this together. One of the things that sometimes people don't very readily recognize is this idea that our community leaders, our spiritual leaders, our imam, our mashayikh, they are in fact social engineers, right? They're tasked with this duty of social engineering. And if that in case is to be the truth, then the question is that what is the ultimate object? What is your end product? And because if you don't have clarity about what the end product is, what that ideal utopian society looks like, then you don't really have a direction or a path to get there. So what would that really look like? Right? What does a utopian Islamic society look like? Is it one in which every single person is a hafiz, in which single person is an alim, in which every single person sits for 5 hours every day in the masjid making the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one in which there is no strife and everyone gets along perfectly in unison, and one where no one makes any mistakes? Well, no. That's not the utopian Islamic society. There's a name for that, and it's called Jannah. And the reason that we know that that's not utopia, at least here on earth, is that if you take the optimal circumstances, right? For those of you who've done calculus, when you integrate and tend towards a limit, right? You take the most ideal circumstances which were possible on earth, meaning that you take the best teacher in the best of times with the best of students, and you look at what that society looked like. And in that society, which we call the خير أمة قرني ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم, that the best of my nation is my generation and those after them and those after them. Not everyone was a hafiz, and not everyone was an alim. Not everyone was perfect, right? In fact, in some ways, and definitely it was not the situation that there was no strife, right? There was, in fact, wars that were waged in the early time of the Muslim Ummah for what they thought to be the truth, right? Each party convinced that they're doing right by God. So it's not that in the best of circumstances you didn't have that. But what did you have, right? So what was the thing that defined that perfect society? That perfect society was not defined by the perfection of their actions. It was defined by something in their heart, and that was love. They were a community of lovers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the like of which humanity has not seen before and will not see after. And it was this tremendous love with which they were imbued with that allowed them to make the sacrifices that they did. And it was this tremendous love that this community of lovers had that allowed them to carry on practice with the dedication that they did. And it was the same love that drove them to become the sons of the Akhirah. They loved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger more than anything else in the world. وَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُكُمْ وَأَبْنَاؤُكُمْ وَإِخْوَانُكُمْ وَأَزْوَاجُكُمْ وَعَشِيرَتُكُمْ وَأَمْوَالٌ اقْتَرَفْتُمُوهَا وَتِجَارَةٌ تَخْشَوْنَهَا وَمَسَاكِنُ تَرْضَوْنَهَا أَحَبَّ إِلَيْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَجِهَادٍ فِي سَبِيلِهِ فَتَرَبَّصُوا حَتَّى يَأْتِيَ اللَّهُ بِأَمْرِهِ. If there's anything in the world Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught the Sahaba that is more beloved to you than Allah, then just wait. And so they didn't give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a chance to show them. They said, Ya Allah, before you show us, we will show you our love. And through this love, they became a community that was dedicated, number one, to the obedience of Allah, and number two, closer. Number one, a community that was dedicated to the obedience of Allah, and number two, to drawing ever closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if that is the end game for the community, if that's where you want to take the ummah, if that's where you want to make a society, then you have to see what are the different obstacles that prevent the state of the ummah as it is today, right? Why is the Tampa community, the Chicago community, the Seattle community, the Fiji community not that community of lovers, right? What stands, it's not like anyone is chaining our hands. It's not like someone has imprisoned us and fettered our thoughts, our ideas, and our ability to act volitionally. We have every right, every liberty, every freedom, and yet we're not done. And so the question arises, well, what is it? And if I were, there's obviously a variegated answer, but if there's one thing that comes to the forefront, it's something that we call the dunya. This is the one thing that stands between the community of today from becoming that community of lovers. Now, this thing about the dunya, historically, throughout most of human history, people had only very limited access to the dunya. Right? When we were hunter-gatherers, you lived in your small enclave. Eventually people learned to sail. Eventually people, railroads were made, airplanes were made. The world became smaller and smaller, and we continue to become smaller. But no matter how far transportation progressed or technology progressed, still a person's access to information, a person's access to what's out there was very, very limited. It was a very small piece of the pie. And that changed dramatically in some ways in 1983, when something called the internet came into existence. And it was initially as a way for government researchers to communicate with each other. And when this thing called the internet came, it soon became the World Wide Net. And it was this very complex network of networks and devices and interconnectivity whose result, in effect, was to make all of the dunya basically accessible to virtually all people. There's not a thing that you can't know. There's not a thing that you can't really see. Right? There was this ultra democratization of information until accessibility became invasive. That's why you need privacy laws now, because it had become the Frankenstein issue. And so what has actually become very clear, that one of the biggest hurdles for people to progress spiritually actually comes from the digital sector. Sins, information, temptations that an entire village could not engage in an entire generation, if you gave them that time, are at the fingertips of a 10-year-old. There's no time in history that we've ever seen anything like that. Right? One of our teachers said, that it seems to me that once they made the iPhone, Shaitan retired. It does the job for you. And I can tell you, as bad as things are, this is just the beginning. Right? Because right now we're just dealing with information. And what's on the horizon is a lot more ominous. And I don't mean to sound alarmist, but when you have something like virtual reality, right? Meta has these. You have these headsets, you can put them on. And you have all types of medical nanotechnology and manipulations. And you have all types of pharmacological interventions. And you have AI, right? Very soon, not only can you only have access to information, you will be able to see, smell, taste, experience, and have tactile access to almost everything in the world. So you could sit in your living room, perhaps, and feel the breeze of the Amalfi Coast. But most people will not settle for just the breeze. Right? It's human nature to very quickly slip into the abyss. And it's exactly going to take another page from what we saw with the internet. Right? And that's going to be the talk later on tonight. When you created this internet, it was an amazing tool, powerful tool. When I was a kid, when we went on road trips. It was very hard without GPS. Right? You look at old McNally maps and stop at gas stations, and now it's a tremendously powerful tool. But I can guarantee you the most visited websites are not Google Maps, right? And you and me both know where most of the traffic on the internet comes. They've actually released these statistics, right? So we know where most people are going is actually the darkest and most abysmal sectors of humanity and features of humanity that people engage in. So it's going to be the same thing. So this is just the beginning of a huge challenge for the Muslim Ummah. And so the reason that we wanted to put this conference together is we want to do something about it. Right? We want to start the conversation. And we opted to try to take a 360-degree approach. Right? Let's look at this holistically. And so we put together a team of shuyukh, people from IT, medical professionals, and psychiatry to sort of take a comprehensive way of addressing this issue from an Islamic, medical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual perspective. Okay, so while this sort of sets the background for the rest of the conference, and I'll tell you for myself personally, there was two things that particularly helped me from really getting sucked into the black hole of the internet. And one of those things was a narration of the Prophet ﷺ that min husn al-Islam al-mar'i tarkuh ma la yani, that from the goodness of a person's Islam is to leave that which does not concern you. And that's something that my teacher really tried to impress within us. And so they would tell us, like, look, if there's something important for you to know, someone will come and tell you about it. So I never read the news, right? So I did have one, like the Grand Mufti in the madrasa we were in, he would listen to BBC every day because he needed to, right? And there was another Shaykh al-Hadith, it was 16 years since he had read the news. But his class was the most spiritual of all the classes, right? Because he created an environment where there's just no noise. I mean, if I were to ask people who follow the news so closely, if I asked you what happened last week, you couldn't tell me. But what I can tell you is that there's a lot of internal noise, and a lot of anxiety, and a lot of trepidation, and a lot of turmoil, just about things that don't even necessarily affect us, right? People sully themselves. And so when I said that, avoiding things that didn't really, pertain to me, I mean, it was to the extent that I didn't have a cell phone until my second year of residency. Right? And you're like, oh my God, can you actually do it? And my teacher I don't even know if he has a cell phone now, and he runs an international business and is a professor at the University of Chicago. So it is possible in the 21st century to live and not be sucked into the black hole. And so there's idea of avoiding things which don't pertain to you, avoiding ghafla. That was a big savior, you could say. And the second thing was lowering the gaze. Right? This was a very impressionable lesson that I learned, because as soon as you start adopting this attitude that I'm going to lower my gaze, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the believers lower their gaze, and there's a lot of things you just can't do, right? Not even if you're doing it for the wrong reason. I couldn't watch the news because all the news anchors, they're all made up and they're so beautiful, and you can't watch any movies because which movie doesn't have at least one woman in it? That's not mahram. You can't watch movies, you can't go on the internet, you can't go on YouTube. Immediately you got shut off from this whole world because you can't look at things that you're not supposed to look at. So that became, and that was a very big, I would say, savior. And something that, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but this idea of lowering the gaze was, a big cornerstone. And then the other question is, why do people turn to the internet in the first place? Because there's a void. People are trying to fill the void. I can tell you, a drowning man does not check his Instagram feed. It just doesn't matter. And the fact of the matter is, all of us are drowning. You're drowning, right? It's time that is losing itself. So by definition, it's losing. And so we tried to put together talks on each of these, and then there's this whole idea of how digital has impacted our dunyawi lives, our relationships, our wellness, our attention. And so I mean, you have like the American Academy of Pediatrics that tell you that kids should not be on the screen more than 15 minutes a day. This is American Academy of Pediatrics, not me, right? And I mean, who has a kid who only spends 15 minutes on the phone? Like no, and they said even those 15 minutes should be to talk to grandparents, right? Because the data is that clear that this is deleterious for kids, right? You have Australia, they've banned social media just recently, it's about a month or two ago, for everyone under the age of 16. This is not Muslims, this is not Sheikh, something Allama, something in, some hyper religious Orthodox Afghanistan. This is Australia. Secular, liberal country, democratic country, says we're not going to let social media for anyone less than 16. Why? Because there's a lot of problems there. Right? There are children that lose their lives to social media. From everything from cyberbullying to distorted self-images and body images, and the list of travesties goes on and on and on. And so we thought we would bring in mental health professionals and people in IT who can help us, show us the tools that we can use to protect ourselves, to keep our kids safe, to keep ourselves safe, to keep ourselves focused in life and productive, right? And I think hopefully one of the ways that we can mark success of a conference like that is that there should be some type of behavioral change, right? Like I think when we walk out of here, someone should at least have the feeling like, man, this is bad news. I need to do something about this. And hopefully by the end of the weekend, people will have done something about that, because we're gonna walk you guys through very like one button click things that you can do to make your life a lot better, right? I can tell you that one of the things that, alhamdulillah, we've had a tradition in our religion every year is something called i'tikaf, right? People would sit in seclusion. Now, i'tikaf was great because people used to sit in i'tikaf when there was no phone and there was no internet. And they used to benefit. Why? Because they needed the seclusion. Now, can you imagine how much people need i'tikaf in a hyper-connectivity context? Even so much so, more so. And this is, maybe anecdotal, but it's been repeated so many times, it's like a truism. So when we would hold, and people who I know, when they hold i'tikaf programs, sometimes what they'll do, like for example in Dar es Salaam, they'll have a tech retreat, or they'll have an i'tikaf, and you deposit your cell phone when you get in. And there's literally withdrawal, right? It feels terrible for a while, but by the time that it's done, almost invariably people will say, I feel so much better. I don't want my phone back, right? I don't want my phone back. But it takes some time, right? So this is hopefully, that's gonna be one of the ways that the measure of success of this conference. So khair, that was a little bit of background. For the next half an hour or so, I wanted to talk about the first topic, which was this topic of lowering the gaze. And this is not really just a topic that's just for kids who are 13-year-olds. No problem, this is better? So this is not necessarily a topic for just the 13-year-olds who are struggling with looking at illicit content or something like that. This is from the teaching of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, number one, and from the teachings of our Prophet to the entire ummah. Right? It was a general instruction in the Quran for the believers and the believing men and the believing women. And so I want to give first a little bit of perhaps a little bit personal story, but I think I'll set the stage for the rest of the discussion. So when I grew up basically like any other kid. And when I was in middle school, I didn't even know that there was this thing about lowering the gaze, right? You look at Amy, you look at Mary, you give people high fives. It's just normal, right? You're going through everyone's trying to be cool. Everyone's trying to be in the popular crowd. The girls are dressed to the nines because they want male attention. It's the same thing, right? It's the same type of human type of behavior that we've seen for thousands of years. And so the same thing went on, and I didn't know any better. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, subhanAllah, gave tawfiq to come to the deen, I think one of the first things that came into my life was this idea of lowering the gaze. Just because I saw how disastrous the effects of not doing that were on one's soul, on an individual level and a societal level. Like you didn't need to, I didn't need data, I didn't need a scientist to tell me, I didn't need a bayan, you just knew, right? Because you lived through it, right? This is absolutely ridiculous. The type of clothing that people wear now in public would be considered scandalous 30 years ago, right? What has happened after the 1960s and the sexual revolution is in some ways also unprecedented society. I mean, there was a time where people were not clothed well, but it was in completely heathen, barbaric societies in the middle of the Amazon, right? I mean, so it's like I was writing to someone that, they say that we've evolved from animals, right? Evolved from apes, but maybe that's what we're evolving to, right? So it's not like we're actually moving forward, we're actually regressing. The more, we feel that we're becoming civil. But when Allah gave tawfiq, He gave tawfiq hard. Like, I would not touch a non-mahram's hand. I would not shake a hand at work. I would not even when I was taking change, I would not touch the woman's hand if she was at the booth. One time I held out my, middle container to take it, and she's like, "What's wrong with your hand? Is it broken?" It's like, "No, not really. I just don't want to touch your hand," And I wouldn't, I wouldn't look at cartoon females. I wouldn't look at a mannequin in the thing. I would look down when I was on the wards. I actually went through my whole cardiology rotation without looking at my attending. And at the end, I didn't want to get flunked. So I said, I wanted to tell you, just explain to you the reason I don't make eye contact is we have this thing for respect for the opposite gender. And I look down, and it's out of chastity, it's nothing like that. And she's like, "Oh, Muhammad, that's so great." And I'm like, out of the frying pan into the fire, because you're just and it wasn't just me, right? There was other people who, when it came on, they just very, very, it came on very strong. And in the beginning, it's a jihad, right? It's hard, right? There is a struggle. But we are slaves, and the definition of a slave is that they need to be obedient to their Lord. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, lower your gaze, you just do it, right? Whether people like it or not. And I can tell you story after story how it's also worked out very beautifully, right? Like I had a patient one time and we had to do an exam. It was an older woman, and we had to do this exam for medical school, and then I did the exam, whatever is medically necessary, and afterwards she wanted to shake my hand. And I said, no, I can't. And I explained to her, and she almost had tears in her eyes, I kid you not. And she was like, that's so beautiful, right? It's like the story of, there's this young man, he got into an elevator, and there was a young lady who walked into the elevator. She was very pretty, she was very used to getting attention, and he just looked down. So she's getting huffy, right? Because he's not paying attention. She starts stamping her feet, this and that. Still doesn't look up. He walks out, and she comes out behind him, and she's like, "What am I? You're so disrespectful. No, but you think I'm not even worth looking at?" And she's going off like this very hyper feminist. And I've come across people like this, right? And so he's like, "No, that's not what it is. We do this out of respect." And he just explained it to her, and in a couple of months, mashallah, she became a Muslim, right? So there's power in this. In the beginning it was hard, but then after a while, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives something which is called purity of the heart. And when that purity enters the heart, just as hard it was not to look, it becomes that hard to look, right? Because it's like a wall, right? If you have a very clean wall and you get one stain on it, it looks terrible. You're like, "Oh my God, let's repaint the wall." But if the whole wall is dirty and you get another stain, you're like, "Who cares?" Right? It's just another scratch on the car. It's just another stain on the carpet because everything's dirty. But once you clean it out, then every little thing you feel it. Every scratch you feel it. And this idea of feeling it is, born out in one hadith, in when the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna nadrata sahmun min sihami iblis masmoom." That indeed looking is from the arrows of shaitan. So shaitan has different arrows. He said this is one of his arrows. And he said it's masmoom. It's poisoned. It's not just an arrow. Why did the Prophet ﷺ say it's masmoom? Because when you get hit with an arrow, it just hurts where it hits. But what happens is if something is poisoned, when it hits you, it gets in your bloodstream and it becomes systemic. It affects everything. And that's the way that the illicit or the unlawful glance works. When it hits you, it affects your entire deen. You don't feel like praying, you don't feel like fasting, you don't feel like doing dhikr, and you feel like doing more bad things. Right? It's a global type of apathy that comes into the individual. And he said, "Man tarakaha makhafati," whoever leaves it for my sake, abdaltuhu imanan yajidu halawatuhu fi qalbihi. If you leave it out of fear of me, because why else would you leave it? There's no other reason than out of the fear of Allah. And he said, I will basically I will replace that for you with iman. And you will find the sweetness of it in your heart. And what that meant, at least for me, what does that mean, sweetness in your faith? And you think like you look inside and it tastes like sugar? No, what that means is that Islam becomes beautiful. Right? Islam becomes beloved to a person. And one thing is to do Islam because you have to, and one thing is you do Islam because you want to. And if by purifying the gaze, that's when the sweetness of iman comes within the heart, you actually start enjoying Islam. It's not a chore. And I think in many ways that was one of the biggest factors in feeling my love for the deen, especially when you see the negative aspects of not doing it. Right? The Imam Shafi one time, he had an eidetic memory, and he accidentally, or you could say, he saw, the heel or the lower portion of the leg of a woman. And after that, he wasn't able to remember the way he was able to remember before. So he went to his teacher, whose name was Waki, and they later put it in prose or in poetry. لَشَكَوْتُ إِلَى وَكِيٍ سُوءَ حِفْظِي, that I complained to Waki about my poor memory. فَأَرْشَدَنِي إِلَى تَرْكِ الْمَعَاصِي, and he told me that you should leave. He guided me to leave bad deeds. وَأَخْبَرَنِي بِأَنَّ الْعِلْمَ نُورٌ, and he told me that knowledge is a light. وَنُورُ اللَّهِ لَا يُؤْتَى لِعَاصِي, and the light of Allah is not given to someone who's disobedient. So this is a light. And when a person doesn't use their eyes in the right way, then there's a darkness that comes where they can't see that light. This purity of heart and purity of keeping one's private and intimate sector pure is one of the cornerstones of progress in Islam. In one verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْحَافِظِينَ فُرُوجُهُمْ وَالْحَافِظَاتِ وَالذَّاكِرِينَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا وَالذَّاكِرَاتِ. And the men who protect their private parts, and the women who protect their private parts, and the ones who remember, men who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the women who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a lot. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention people who protect their private parts first and then talk about dhikr? It doesn't seem like there's any type of connection. But there's absolutely a spiritual connection. Because if you don't do the first, you're not going to get into the second. Right? You can't go forward. It's like getting into your car and revving the engine, but your car is in neutral. It's not going to move forward. Right? You need that spiritual purity, that purity of glance, the purity of heart, before a person can taste dhikr, engage in dhikr, and be profuse in it. And it is the path to Jannah. مَنْ يَضْمَنُ لِي مَا بَيْنَ لِحْيَيْهِ وَمَا بَيْنَ رِجْلَيْهِ أَضْمَنَ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. The Prophet said, if you guarantee for me two things, what is between your two jaws and what is between your two thighs, that two legs, I will guarantee for that person Jannah. So what does the Quran teach us about lowering the gaze? In Surah An-Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very directly says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, tell the believing, he's telling the Prophet that tell the believing people, يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, that they should, ghad means to lower something. He said, يَغُضُّ مِنْ صَارِهِمْ, tell them to lower their gaze. وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ, and guard their private parts. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ, that is pure for them. إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing about what they do. The Quran is, and for those who have sat in tafsir class, they'll hopefully have come to appreciate how precise the language of the Quran and how deep psychologically the Quran is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying the first thing is that lower your gaze, right? And then right after that, he said, وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. Right? Why is that? Because it is the gaze that leads to impure relationships. And there's a lot of impure relationships going on in this world today. Why? Because people don't lower their gaze. they would say that about maybe 20 to 30% of people in a marriage, maybe as high as 60% of people in relationships, have infidelity in the relationship. You know what that means? That means that maybe anywhere from 1/3 to half of kids out there are being raised by not their biological father. Just think about that. The entire society is a lie. Right? Your whole life is your father is not your father. That's a real problem. And that's pretty bad. And you know, why is it so bad? A lot of people in the West, in modern society, because we're so steeped into it, they become desensitized to it. Actually, about half of people say that there's nothing actually immoral or wrong with looking at illicit material. They actually think it's completely fine. Well, the reason that it's not fine is because it leads to that other 60% that we're talking about. But if you don't ascribe to that, right, the Quran tells you, well, you know, there's inherently, if you're a complete atheist, if you're a complete materialist, and you're a complete hedonist, why would you see it as something wrong? It's completely fine. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. If you care about purity, if you care about morals, ethics, about being good, if you have some sense of haya, right? If you have any, you know, iota left in you of goodness, then it's going to matter. And if you don't have that, the Prophet said, he said, if you don't have any haya, then do whatever you want. And that's what you're seeing outside, people living like animals. But if you have some haya, if you have a beating heart, and you have a soul, then it should matter. Then it should matter about lowering the gaze. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends the verse by saying, Inna Allah khabirum bima yasna'un. And what we're being told over here is that if you do care, then know that every glance is counted. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is counting every single action, every single gaze, every single thought, and He knows. And it's a double entente, because He's telling you He knows, and at the same time He's telling you the solution. Khabirun bima yasnun. I know what you're doing. And if you want to get out of it, just remind yourself that in the same way that with the intensity with which you're watching what you're watching, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you even more intensely. Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. Right? Mirsad is like when you have a prey and the gun, target hones in on the prey, and that moment of intensity before you pull the trigger, that's mirsad. That's how intensely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching every move, every thought, every action. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says in another verse, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا zina. Don't get close to zina. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have just said, don't do zina, but He didn't. Why didn't He say just don't do zina? Because He knows that if you get close to it, you're going to slip and fall into it. It's quicksand. You know, there is a, there is a point, event horizon around black holes. If you pass the event horizon, you're not getting out. Right? You're not getting out. And you could say that in some ways, the unlawful glance is like the event horizon that leads to something bad. It's going to either lead to a bad thought, or a bad action, or something worse. But seldom does it ever stop at just a glance and you just walked away. Right? It just doesn't work like that. So what is the fiqh of this? Right? According to the Sharia, ghadd al-basar, or lowering the gaze, means that you have to turn the eyes from something which is prohibited to be seen, which is, people who are non-marriageable, people other than non-marriageable relatives. So you can look at your mother, you can look at your sister, you can look at your aunt, people who you cannot marry, you're allowed to look at them. Your daughter, so on and so forth. And similarly from the sister side, you can look at your father, you can look at your direct uncle, not through marriage, or your direct uncle, people who are unmarriageable, what we call mahrams. So you can look at them, but to turn your eye away from other than them, this is called ghadd al-basar. And Ibn Hibban said that to look at a non-mahram woman with intent, like to purposely look at a non-mahram woman with pleasure, is totally prohibited. And to do so without a motive is makruh. Okay? And this is not, we often have the discussion as if it's only for brothers. That's not how it goes. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُم. The very next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, hold on sister, you can't get away. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنَّ. The same thing. Why women second, right? Why men first? It's not because men are privileged, it's just men have a bigger problem with this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed the more guilty party first, right? Otherwise, it's usually ladies first, right? So as for women, there's one scholarly body that actually says it's completely forbidden for them to see non-mahrams, period. A woman should not look at a non-mahram. And they actually take their riwayah, their proof from a hadith of when Maymuna radiallahu anha and Salama were with the Prophet sallallahu. And Abdullah ibn Maktoum, who was a blind Sahaba, he basically, is a longer hadith, but he came into the room, and the Prophet ﷺ, he asked them, he came into the room, he said, you should go inside. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, he can't see us, he's blind. He said, he's blind, but you're not. Right, so that's because of that, the people said that, okay, the women should not look at a non-mahram, period. Then some jurists said that, it's not as strict, that there's no harm if a woman looks at a non-mahram if it's not without desire. And they took out their proof from a narration from Aisha radiallahu anha. One time there were some Abyssinian youth who were showing some military exercises in the masjid, in the courtyard, in the courtyard of the mosque. And the Prophet ﷺ gave shoulder to Aisha radiallahu anha. She looked at him and he let her watch until she got tired, right? And he didn't stop her. So since he allowed her, that made, and obviously she was not looking with that eye. It was just an entertainment, a show that she was watching. The Prophet ﷺ did not object to it. So they say, okay, if there's not desire, then it's allowed. So if you want to think about this, and then I'll mention one more narration and then sort of bring it together. So there's a narration from Ali radiallahu anhu. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تتبعوا النظرة الأولى لك والآخرة عليك. That don't follow one glance with another glance, right? Meaning the first one, that's for you, but the second one is going to be against you, right? And so that doesn't also mean that make your first glance like this, right? And keep on going. Mean that inadvertently, if you see something, it's not upon you, because it's life. You go on with your, you have to live in the world. But when you do the double take, right, that's going to be a problem. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take, a person to account for that. يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the deception of the eyes. When a person walks by and they're looking like this on the side, وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورُ, and all the dirty thoughts you think afterwards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, right? So, if you want to think about it from a fiqh perspective, there's two parts to this. One part is intent, right? And one part is desire. So if a person, man or woman, looks unintentionally the first time, it's okay. Right? That's permitted. If a person looks intentionally, then there could be one of two possibilities. It could either be done with desire, or it could be done without desire. If it's done you look intentionally with desire, it's totally prohibited. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. If you are looking intentionally and it's without desire, then you could say that there could be a discussion, that if there's a need, then you can look. And if there is no need, then you could say at least, perhaps it could be, disliked in makruh. And this is just to think about things from a fiqhi perspective. But the reason I mentioned this is how I went through medical school and it was very difficult, and you doing all this. Sometimes even in the workplace, there will be some times where you're interacting with the opposite gender, right? And you're going to do an interview, and if you look in the whole interview like this, the person's not going to get you the job, right? And does that mean that you can't? So you come into issues. And so what that means is that people have to train themselves also to look platonically, to look with an empty eye, right? And what that means is that, what does it mean to have desire? Means that there's no physical inclination. And what that means is to look at the other person as you would look towards your own child or towards a beautiful tree, right? It's just something nice. If they're beautiful, yeah, they're beautiful, but you're not making something out of it, right? You're not going beyond that. And the same thing for men and women, but people need to be careful, and it's very easy for people to lie through themselves. So like one of my teachers, he would tell me, like, when you're at the hospital and this and that, like, you're going to interact with female residents and female attendings and female professors. I mean, there used to be a time when I was an undergrad, I would go through my entire classes of lectures and keep my hand like this so I wouldn't see the professor. So if I were to see my professor outside the college classroom, I wouldn't have known who the professor was. So is that an overshoot? I don't think there's something called overshoot, inshallah, when it comes to taqwa. Right? Because you're going to be on the safe side. This is something which is rewarded. This is something which keeps a person safe, so on and so forth. But as you move on in life, it's not always practical to do that, right? So you need to know where the parameters are. So what he would tell me from a very practical perspective is that when you're meeting regular people and it's just completely like normal, then just keep it completely normal. Otherwise, you're going to make and attach meaning to something where there's no meaning even, right? So you have a 60-year-old chairman of your department, you're having a meeting, and you're trying to lower your gaze. I mean, there was no shahwat to begin with, right? And you're putting shahwat in a scenario where there was no shahwat to begin with. But he said, you will know when your heart has an inclination towards someone. And that person you need to avoid. I remember his words like 25 years later with a 10-foot pole, right? Because that spells trouble. That's where affairs happen on the internet. That's where affairs happen within families, brother-in-law and sister-in-law, with all these different type of crazy drama, workplace affairs, people who go for conferences. As soon as you know that the attraction is coming, the desire is coming, then you should avoid that. And I'll extend this by saying one thing. Really, the madar, the thing that from a fiqh perspective, a lot of this rotates around is based on desire. And one of the ways that, shaitan gets people, there's this one person who came to a friend of mine who's a mufti. And so he would be going to those areas in the town where men meet with men, right? And he was going to go to their clubs and all that. And he said, yeah, it's permissible because I'm not going with to the opposite gender, right? So he said, you foolish person. It doesn't work like that. As long as if you have desire towards a stone, you can't look at the stone, right? If you have desire towards an animal, you not look at wherever there's desire for something that's not permissible for you, then you need to turn your gaze. And the thing that you cannot see, you cannot touch. What you cannot see, you cannot touch. Right? Simple principle. This is sort of the fifth perspective of it. Now I just wanted to spend a few minutes on the spiritual aspect of this. And the spiritual aspect is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually cares about what we look at. I wouldn't get too fiqhi about this issue. I would try, especially in this age of hyper intimacy and this is the fitna of the time. Especially the younger a person is, the more careful they should be. And one of the things that person needs to remember is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares where we look. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He's watching the gaze. He watched the gaze of the Prophet ﷺ. قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا. The Prophet ﷺ would keep on looking at the sky. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I see you. I see you. And he told the Prophet even where to look. He said, وَلَا تَعَدُ عَيْنَاكَ أَنْهُمْ تُرِيدُ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Don't turn your eyes away from the Sahaba. Keep your eyes on them. Right? Forget about the dunya. These are the real people. These are my beloved community. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares. And the problem with the issue of the gaze, if you ask me from a technically fiqhi perspective, if you looked at a non-mahram, is that a kabira? Is it a major sin? In and of itself, if it just happened once, you're not doing it all the time. No, it's a minor sin. But from a spiritual perspective, what happens is that minor sin can sometimes create a big distance between you and Allah. And that's a big problem. Right? That's a big problem. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ghira. Wallahu aghyaru minni. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I gave you these eyes. You turn your eyes away from them to look at this filth? To look at the things I didn't want you to look at? I mean, what's wrong with you? So this idea of creating, what's it called, spiritual distance is something that a person should take very seriously. This is the reason that people feel so dirty, so defiled when the eyes are not controlled. Right? Did you ever meet a person who said, yeah, I looked at the Quran for 3 hours, I felt so dirty afterwards? It's not going to happen. Do you ever meet a person in your life that, oh, I looked at the Kaaba for 3 hours, I felt so dirty? And it's something that the more you look, the more peace comes in your heart. I can guarantee you almost every person who has a problem with illicit material, after they're done with their session, you don't feel too great about yourself. You feel dirty. Right? Forget about you feeling dirty. The people who are doing it feel dirty. Right? They have increased rates of mental health issues. They have increased rates of suicide. They have increased rate of extortion, trafficking. There's a whole slew of problems. Forget about the person who's looking. So then the question is, if this is an issue, right? How do we navigate getting beyond this? One of the things is just to rewire the way we think. Mawlana Ashraf Ali Thani, rahimahullah, he said something very beautiful. He said that looking is the bad glance. It's like called su'un nadhar. This is one of the most useless things you can do in your life, because no matter how much you look, you're never going to fill your You're never going to fill your eye. Right? There is no woman who can fill your eye. There is no man that will fill your eye. It's just not going to happen. And he said that looking is the disease of the idiot, because the more you look, the more you want, and you can never have it. And therefore it is the disease of the idiot. Right? You just starve yourself. You create yourself more in mashaqqa, and place yourself in mashaqqa. And the cure to this, in a spiritual sense, is to develop a sense of haya. Right? Develop a sense of haya. Our teacher would tell us, he said that the women in this time don't do hijab, so you must do hijab from them. Right? He was very strict. He told me, like, I can't even give a bayan unless there's a physical partition between the men and the women. Right? And I was like, I'm going to go back to the US. That's not happening. And I got a call from Minna. Minna having a thing? I was like, I can't do your talk. And they're like, no, we really want you to come. I'm like, I just can't. I didn't even raise the issue. I was like, well, they're going to laugh me out of the room. So I was like, I can't do your talk. Then they called me back. They're like, Shaykh Omar, we want you to come. We'll do whatever it takes. I said, then put a partition. They put a partition, Minna. Right? It wasn't a very good one. It was a partition. It was a token partition. And then, this brother came to me afterwards, after I gave my talk, and he says, Akhi, this is not from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, right? And I'm like, yeah, and skinny jeans are, right? It's just the context. Have some common sense. But there's this idea of doing, if you want to keep a pure heart, a person should do hifadha. Right? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. You actually have to actively be proactive about protecting your private space. That's not something that you can just be laissez-faire and say that it will just take care of itself. And being active about that is avoiding those type of situations where a person is not gonna end up very well, right? Don't go to the mall right when everyone gets out of school and it's just flooded, and you're gonna see all types of people in inappropriate clothing. It's just bad decision making. There's this one scholar. One time he went to, he wouldn't even go shopping until late at night, until no one's there, right? As when the werewolves come out. And so he went on and he's walking around, there's no one there, and he goes through aisle 1, aisle 2, aisle 3, and there's muftis up. He comes out at the same time. So werewolves and muftis come out after 11 at Walmart. But the idea, why were they doing that? Because they didn't want to take a chance. Right? You don't want to roll the dice. And you want to think about the benefits. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, حُرِمَتِ النَّارُ عَلَىٰ عَيْنٍ دَمَعَتْ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made haram the hellfire on 3 different types of eyes. 1, an eye that cries from the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if the drop of water doesn't come down, it just wells in the eye, it's enough for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to forgive you, to make the hellfire haram. Think about that. مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. حُرِمَتِ النَّارُ عَلَىٰ عَيْنٍ سَحِرَتْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And on that eye that remains awake, fighting in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all night, guarding the frontiers of Islam. And he said, حُرِمَتِ النَّارُ عَلَىٰ عَيْنٍ غَضَّتْ عَنْ مَحَارِمِ اللَّهِ. And on that eye that lowered itself from the things that were impermissible of Allah. Right? You're getting I mean, look, not everyone can do jihad. Not everyone can cry, but everyone can lower their gaze. And the hellfire is becoming haram on that person. And then you want to think about the different harms when we don't do this. Right? The Prophet says in one very scary hadith, he said, لَعَنَ اللَّهُ النَّادِرَ وَالْمَنْذُورَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have sent la'na and send curse on that person who looks and the person who's being looked at. Right? Both people are in deep trouble. And this is a surefire way to lose barakah. This is a surefire way to lose will to do good. Surefire way to become lazy. Surefire way to become far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I would end by saying that maybe one of the biggest harms that comes from this is one of those obstacles that's preventing us from becoming that community of lovers that we talked about in the beginning, right? And if we want to become that community of people who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like that passionately, and become that utopian society, then this is a good place to start. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who have control over their eyes, and make our eyes such that they're only concentrated on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, such that the best day of ours will be when we will be able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Jannah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
استووا مستقيم سد القلب يرحمكم الله مشوا السلف للسلم اقبلوا على الله قلوبا خاشعة الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الأخلاء يومئذ بعضهم لبعض عدو إلا المتقين يا عباد لا خوف عليكم اليوم ولا أنتم تحزنون الذين آمنوا بآياتنا وكانوا مسلمين ادخلوا الجنة أنتم وأزواجكم تحبرون يطاف عليهم بصحاف من ذهب وأكواب وفيها ما تشتهيه الأنفس وتلظ الأعين وأنتم
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دهاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For those brothers and sisters just now joining us for Isha, inshallah there will be a talk after the salah, after the sunnahs, by visiting scholar from New Jersey, Shaykh Kamaluddin Ahmad, followed by dinner, and for you all to come stand up, which is Allah. stage. Okay? Yeah, fine. You have the flag. Leave them out front, and then when you announce, be like, yeah, the flags are out front. And then I'm thinking, did you come late? Okay, I'll try to fit you in. Probably after this talk. Yeah, yeah, focus. Right before.
so I knew you'd do that.
Huh?
I turned it off just so I knew you'd do that.
I mean, we can start now. I was just worried. Normally people pray their sunnahs, but I'll go up now. So once they finish, if you'd like to get seated.
You rested? Yeah, remember that. And I had my tea.
Okay, remember that. Do you need anything else?
No. I might need to plug this in.
We're good to go to start, right?
Yeah, once they're done. So one issue is that this mic is it's not as sensitive as we'd like it to be. So if you could speak with it a little closer to your mouth, just so everyone can hear.
बोट राइड उधार है हमारी
Is that fine for you? It's just this is the charger?
Yeah.
Might be a bit short. What I can do is, if you want to position it in this manner, maybe we could.
No, but then it's gonna be
Okay. So just
we
maybe.
can't use that mic.
No, that microphone it's not using our speaker set, so it's very muffled. Yeah.
Okay. Alright, but I'm gonna start. You wanna go first or should I go first?
I go first.
Huh?
I go first.
Do you prefer cold water or is room temperature? Okay, take it. So 9:30. I'll give you a 10-minute.
Just pick this up and
Gigi, I told them not to.
put it over there.
Would you like a 10-minute ishara or a 5-minute ishara? Or no ishara?
Sure, 5 minutes is fine.
Okay, so a 9:30. Yeah.
Do you know where
Do you want some?
can you let Ali Smile know I replied very shortly to his message?
Take it, Shaykh.
I think he did answer before the started. I just let him know where he is that I sent
Okay,
that.
chill. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I apologize for broken conversations.
I saw you at Istaba. No, no.
So if all brothers could come forward, inshallah, we'll be closing the seat. Inshallah. So just to look at the schedule ahead, Shaykh Kamaluddin will be delivering his address, and right afterwards, we will break for dinner. After dinner, there will be brothers only I'tidaf program, and inshallah, the program will run until 12:30 a.m. The program will run until 12:30 a.m. So after dinner, it will be a brothers only I'tidaf program. Jazakumullah khair.
Abdullah Mullah? See if you can find an extension point. Someone's grabbing it now. Are you the computer person? Are you the computer person? Yeah, it's just flickering. It's an issue when it wakes up from its sleep.
Do you know if it was charged before?
It's like 80% charged. It's an issue with waking up from sleep. If it doesn't,
Is it on your phone?
No. Yeah, I should have put it on my phone. That's a good idea for next time. It shows up.
Sorry.
You see, it's just flickering.
I can move it up if you'd like. Oh, wow. That's weird.
I think there's something on it.
The laptop's flickering. So I have to come here first. Yeah, let me get mine.
No, no. What I'm going to start, and you just sit here, and you keep closing it, opening it. Okay. The pin is 8798. And then see if you can start.
Some tape.
Let's see. You just stay nearby. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. MashaAllah, alhamdulillah, it's very nice to be back in this masjid. and in the city, and to see many familiar faces, but also, mashallah, many new faces. May Allah Ta'ala accept our gathering here in His blessed home for His sake. And may Allah Ta'ala make it a means of my hidayah, your hidayah, and a source of hidayah for all of our families and friends and for the whole ummah, inshallah. Ameen. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa nashhadu anna sayyidina wa sanadina wa shafi'ana Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'd. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qad aflahal mu'minun alladhina hum fi salatihim khashi'un walladhina hum 'anil laghwi mu'ridun. Sadaqallahul azim. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ummatihi ajma'in innaka hamidun majid. Every one of us in our life, in everything that we do, would want to be successful. Whatever it is. Even if it's something small broke in your home and you want to fix it, you want to succeed at fixing it so you could move on. Or if it's something as major that you want to be successful in your studies or your profession or any task that you set yourself. Why is this human nature? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it part of human nature that a human is talib of falah. A human wants to succeed and prosper and flourish. Now, imagine if you and me succeeded, were successful at so many things in our dunya, so many things in our worldly life, but we were unsuccessful mu'minun. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins Surah Mu'minun by explaining something very clear. قَدْ أَفْلَهَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. But it doesn't stop. It could have been possible that the mu'minun have falah, the believers are successful only and simply and entirely because of their iman. But no, there's some shurut, there's some conditions, there's some clauses. Alladhina, those mu'minun. Or you can take it in another way of tafsir, it's for bayan. Actually, Allah Ta'ala is explaining who are the mu'minun. Who are the mu'minun? Okay. Hum fi salatihim khashi'un. This was 1 year ago, our topic with you in this very same masjid, February 2024. Those who are humbly penitent and stand in reverential awe and have feelings of humility and love and fear and awe and majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their salah. This was 1 year ago. We had a workshop here on salah. Second aspect of believers. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. And the second quality, and just imagine also this is being said together. So now I will do a layer by layer tafsir. Even that person who is mu'min, is a believer, prays their salah, and actually prays their salah with khushu, with humility and awe and reverence, it's still not enough. There could be one more thing that can make them unsuccessful in the ultimate success of falah, and that is what? That they don't follow the next ayah of Quran, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. That they are the people who they spurn and turn away and turn their back on. They do i'rad from lagh. Lagh is not haram. Lagh means futile, pointless, wasteful behavior, distraction, digital distraction, non-digital distraction. they waste their time. Okay, Ya Allah, maybe a non-Muslim wastes his time. No, Allah Ta'ala is talking about Muslim. Maybe alladhina amanu, no, mu'min. Maybe the one who doesn't pray salah, prays salah. Maybe the one who doesn't pray salah but doesn't feel in salah, prays salah, feels in salah. Still not fully guaranteed to have success because they might end up in love. They might do doom scrolling, extra surfing, random talking, super fanatical sport following, celebrity following, binge watching, binge shopping. Oh, this is a long list. I made a list. Actually, this is the main reason I actually made a list. Allahu Akbar. And then I just tried to think of it's a very long list. And almost 99% of us have 99% of those things on our list. And you heard the Imam Qari, I'm not sure who it was tonight. Maybe it was Hifdhur Rahman? MashaAllah, subhanallah. He was our Imam in Masjid Umar 1 year ago when we prayed Salah there. So you saw the word, you saw another way Allah Ta'ala talks about love in Quran. Like there's so many descriptions of Jannah, right? One description of Jannah is that you will get to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One description of Jannah is the tremendous success, Ridwanun min Allahi Akbar. Allah Ta'ala's I'lan, His announcement of pleasure, will be the greatest bounty and blessing in Jannah. But another description of Jannah was what? That they will not hear any love in there. Kidaba came second. That's falsehood, lies. The first thing that Allah is describing is what will they not hear in Jannah? They won't hear vain talk, idle talk, futile talk, pointless talk. Means no Netflix in Jannah, no web internet in Jannah, no news sites in Jannah, no sports teams to follow in Jannah, no fan watching in Jannah, no celebrity following in Jannah, no newspaper reading in Jannah. And then we say, oh, I want to make my life on earth like Jannah. The whole list of things, none of them will be in Jannah. Some of that stuff could go to haram, but even the non-haram of it is called love. Why? Because it distracts us from the purpose and the mission of valuing our time. That is an amana, a gift, a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it will prevent us from being successful believers. Can you imagine that I'm a successful student, I'm a successful professional, I'm a successful father, may Allah Ta'ala grant us these things that we can be successful in our roles, but I'm an unsuccessful believer. So this is one word in Quran, love. Second word Allah Ta'ala uses in Quran, another word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in Quran, ghafla. Ghafla in English is translated often as heedlessness, but what it really means is ghafil anillah. So it's the actual opposite to dhikr. Means the person forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were not mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were mindless of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a very dangerous state to be in, because this is what enables a person to do sin. It's very rare that a person, if you ask them they did a sin, they say, I want to make tawbah, and you ask them that when you made that sin, were you remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Were you in a state, I'm not talking about any particular sentence or word on the tongue, were you in a state where your heart or mind, were you thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So no, I completely forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I was focused on whatever that pleasure was, whatever that benefit was, whatever I wanted to do, I was focused on that. Okay? So you were so attracted, so enticed, so enamored by this haram pleasure, this haram benefit, maybe this haram interest, whatever it was, that you forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no way you can remember that you are abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not possible. How can you remember that I'm Abdullah when you forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then when you forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you forgot you were abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're not abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you might as well be abd of your nafs. And a person ventures into sin. And then they say, and then you ask them the next question, okay, and then what made you come and feel this remorse and regret and you want to make tawbah? It's very simple. I remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu Akbar. That's it. Sometimes it happens that the person got some punishment for their sin in this life, they're struggling, they have failure, they realize it was a mistake. But many times actually it's this simple. That also is a process Allah Ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran. That they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after having forgotten Him. And then they make tawbah for their sin. So this dhikr, in this meaning, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can prevent a person from sinning, and after they sin can bring them back to repentance. Ghafla means that you don't have that dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Absent-minded, heartless, forgetful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ultimate end of this, Allah Ta'ala even uses this word for the kuffar. Ula'ika kal an'am bal hum adal. Who are those people? The ghafilun. The people who are heedless of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I want you to think, when I'm watching the Netflix show, when I'm binge watching, when I'm surfing, even halal things, I'm watching the sports, I'm checking the sports score. I'm checking the sports score because I want a particular Serbian to lose because I can still not forget 1990s, what happened in Bosnia. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. Yeah. But technically, all of this is ghafla. It all has nothing to do with akhirah, nothing to do with siratul mustaqim, nothing to do with i'la'i kalimatil, nothing to do with exalting the glory and oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing to do with saving humanity, nothing to do with calling humanity to the path of deen. It has nothing to do with that. It's a luxury. And that's why a lot of Muslims in the West indulge in it. It's a luxury. Free time is a luxury. To have free time. And this is the way modern capitalism has structured the life cycle of a human being. That you will have your productive time, which you're giving to the economy, basically your capitalist masters, whether they're one level above you or they're hidden masters several levels behind you, and then you will be given free time. But to make sure you don't use your free time freely, because you might end up using it for the sake of deen or for justice, we will then have a multi-billion, trillion-dollar onslaught of entertainment upon you, so that actually all your free time becomes occupied with sports, entertainment, marketing, etc. You're not actually as free as we think we are. And actually, this is how we ended up in ghafla. Now you saw the theme of this retreat, distraction. What happens? A person can get distracted from the basic, go back one ayah. They get distracted first from the khushu in their salah. So okay, mashallah, good Muslim, they took a break from the soccer match or whatever they were watching, right? And they prayed their salah, like, how can I miss my salah just because I'm watching the match? So they go into salah. You tell me, what do you think the quality of that salah is? They're praying, alhamdulillah, I'm happy, alhamdulillah, they're obeying Allah Ta'ala, they did it, they left the TV, they made the wudu, they're standing in salah. You tell me what's going on in their mind and heart in the salah. They're still thinking about the match. Not only are they thinking about it, they're missing it. Allahu Akbar Kabira. In the dunya, you're supposed to be missing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This person inside of ibadah is missing the dunya. You try that with any human and see what happens. If you understand, you try that with some human lover and be talking to them but missing someone else and see what happens to you. Yeah, Allahu Akbar. You talk to some human beloved who ostensibly you are saying is my beloved, and if they could see how much you're missing something else, see what happens to you. But this person is praying, and they're actually praying a little bit faster. And after salam, they're going to set the Guinness Book of World Records at how fast after second salam can you get back in front of the TV screen. So you didn't miss that goal that some guy somewhere in the world who you will never meet is going to kick some round ball into a net. Allahu Akbar. This is the least effect. This is the least effect. But now I want you to think that if this distraction is so powerful that it can make me forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside of ibadah, inside salah, then imagine what this is going to do to me outside of ibadah. And this is something I would talk about a bit more in the late night, midnight session. But you'd be surprised that ghafla is the biggest highway to sin for the believer. For which one? The mu'minun, who are praying salah and trying in their salah to be khashi'un. That type of person doesn't go straight into sin. They don't go direct. Illa al-aman al-ayad billah. They will end up in sin through ghafla. But we don't realize it. So when some friends were thinking and talking about what should be the topic for this weekend, and normally a topic for a weekend in the middle of Shaban is preparing for Ramadan. So those of you who are in the Jummah Khutbah and Istaba, I already explained that topic. But the question is that maybe we can think about how is it that we keep messing up our Ramadan after Ramadan ends. And one way we do this is we go back to all those things. We go back to all the surfing, go back to all the entertainment, go back to all the leisure, go back to all the pleasure, the way a lover reunites with their lost beloved. And this is something that has kept us. Okay. Now I want to tell you a hadith of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that is narrated by Sayyidina Muadh ibn Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala an, who himself is one of the incredible Sahaba. All were incredible, but one of the notable Sahaba in terms of his ilm, tafaqquh fi din. And this hadith was narrated by Imam al-Tabarani al-Maltana in his Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir, and was declared to be authentic by Imam Jalaluddin as-Suyuti rahimahullah. And it's a very powerful hadith. And this is also my own series of first I always ended doing in Tampa. I can remember the first time I learned this hadith also. Ajib hadith. Sayyidina Muadh ibn Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he narrates that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, لَيْسَ يَتَحَسَّرُ أَهْلُ الْجَنَّةِ, that the people of Jannah, the mu'minun who are inside Jannah, who have been gifted Jannah by Allah Ta'ala, are inside Jannah, they will not have any hasra, they will not have any regret for anything that happened in the dunya, illa ala sa'atin, except on any moment, any second, marrat bihim lam yadhkurullaha fiha, that any moment passed in their life that they were not remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I had not completed the sentence and I asked you, what do you think a person would regret in Jannah? First answer most of you would have given, I don't think anybody would regret anything. Isn't Jannah the place where you have no regrets, you have no sorrows? It's pure happiness, pure joy, pure bliss. The first time shocked even that there's even a regret in Jannah. I say, okay, but Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said there will be a regret, but only one regret. So then I said, then fill in the blank. And you would probably say, okay, maybe when they did haram, or maybe when they, you might list all types of sins, right? I say, no, it's not any of the sins. So, okay, maybe when they, hurt another believer, hurt another insan. No, that's not what it is. They will not have any regret illa ala sa'atin, except on that moment, any moment, every moment that passed in their life where they did not remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu Akbar. Clearly, the people who even make it into Jannah but had some ghafla in their life are feeling regret in Jannah. Clearly, there must be something in Jannah they lost maybe some higher daraja, some higher rank, maybe more closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe more visits with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. That's the cost. That's a very high cost to pay. Give you an example. If I said that, okay, look, and I know, and I'm going to come to this, and maybe I should come to it sooner. I know it's not practically possible for 99% of us to stop all of this 100%. I know that. If I tell you never ever watch a sports thing, or never ever whatever watch or look up a car, or never do these things, right? But the question is the amount and extent to which we're doing it. That is what's hurting us. You would be amazed, and I think tomorrow, inshallah, our guest, Dr. Jawad, will also maybe, most likely, perhaps be sharing with you that even non-Muslims, be they psychiatrists, psychologists, people who specialize in marketing, whether they're doing it for good or evil, they will say that humanity, not just believers who are trying to be successful in akhirah, humanity is suffering because of their over-engagement in digital media, social media, and they use this term, digital detox, which means they view it as toxic. That's something to think about, right? If they view it as toxic, and they're just looking at purely from a neutral, secular perspective of dunya, how should I view it when I'm trying to be a successful mu'min on Siratul Mustaqim? How toxic should I view it? How toxic is it for me? Now, some teachings that help us counter this. Very famous hadith that all of you will know as soon as I say it, but worth looking at that hadith in different contexts. So today we're going to do it in the context of this notion of distraction. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب وبابر السبيل. So Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said kun, which means your very existential way of life. Remember, kun fayakun. Your very existential way of being in this world should be ka'annaka gharib, as you're a complete stranger to it. So for example, I'm sure none of you surf Russian news because it's completely a stranger to you, right? None of you are following the Russian sports. None of you are looking at Russian brand cars. None of you are, etc., right? Why? Because you are gharib to that. You're estranged from that. Imagine if we did all of this, had the same attitude of estrangement to all of the fluff, all of the excess of this dunya. Something I will talk maybe about tomorrow, but I feel like I should work it in here now, is the only way this can happen is if you are plugged into deen. So look at my hands carefully. You cannot unplug any addiction, any affliction, any even attraction unless you immediately put the plug in something else. The only way to unplug oneself from digital media, social media, wasteful time is to plug yourself in to some activity, some effort of deen. In fact, those people who do hifz of Quran, amongst many other things, one of the most beneficial aspects of memorizing Quran al-Kareem is it forces you to take time out and memorize it, then take time out and review it, then take time out and recite it, then take time out and understand it, then take time out and reflect it. It demands your time. And this is also, and the reason I bring it in, this is also unfortunately a type of ghaflat that we've done. We stay away from those activities of deen that demand our time, whereas we willingly engage in those activities of dunya that snatch our time. So a lot of people, and I myself was like this for many years, we don't think that, oh, how am I going to enroll in a part-time hifz program because where am I going to find the time? How am I going to have the time? Where am I going to enroll in a part-time ilm program Where am I going to have the time? How can I find the time? I don't have the time. This is how we talk to ourselves, right? So when it comes to deen, all of a sudden, Allahu Akbar, I don't have time, I can't spare time, I can't make time, I don't have time. But when it comes to something in dunya, something of pure mundane, inane is maybe the word to use, just purely futile stuff, somehow we make the time. We give it time. It's an imbalance. And remember what I said earlier, it's because we have the time to give, it's a luxury. I remember when I was a full-time student in Pakistan, before we had children or anything, honestly, I wouldn't have time. I wouldn't have had time. Why? Because all my time was taken up by the study. In fact, I would be struggling to find more time for more study, and especially as you progress higher, there wasn't even time. I would say I don't even have time to prepare every single lesson of hadith because the amount of commentary you can read on one hadith is so almost near infinite. I just couldn't do it. I actually ran out of time. That is, alhamdulillah, for me, that was probably the best times of my life. And now, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. A person gives all their time to dunya and then says, oh, I've run out of time. You had time, you just spent it. You spent it. So you have to be connected and plugged into some program, and some maybe somewhat intense program of deen that takes your time and uses it valuably before you spend your time foolishly. And this is the type of ghafla that we stay away from doing that. We don't want to do that. We want to have this free time that we can waste. And then we have so many ways to euphemize this. This is my downtime. This is my me time. Somehow we're like saving it up, basically to use for ghafla, but what are we going to call it? This is my downtime. This is my me time. I need to unwind. I need to relax. Okay, the day went, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Today, no. Today I needed to unwind and relax. Okay, you tell me. And I've also said this. So I ask myself and you. I'll answer it for you. You don't have to answer it to me. I'll answer myself to you. Anytime you have said this on day one, let's say Tuesday, that, okay, today I'm not going to do whatever it is, something productive. I'm just going to do nothing, waste time because I need downtime. I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow comes, there's no way you do it. I'll tell you myself. This never happened to me. I've never been successful at this, that on Tuesday said I will do nothing to relax and unwind, and then Wednesday I hit it hard. No way. Wednesday again, I want to relax and unwind. That's what the nafs is. You gave the nafs a little bit to also understand this. You need to understand the psychology of the nafs. The psychology of nafs. It is like a rabid dog. If you give a rabid, starved dog just a few scraps, its hunger doesn't get quenched in any way. In fact, it becomes even more hungry, even more insatiated, such that it will overpower you that it wants more. And they understood this. You see, when I was a young man, there was no way you could watch an entire season in one day. When I was a young man, you had 30-minute episode, and then you got to wait the next week for the 30-minute episode. But the psychologists, they kept working. The people in marketing, they kept researching, and they started to understand. And I don't think they actually did this, but they didn't study from our deen and our shuyukh, but they ended up understanding what we know is the psychology of the nafs. And when they discovered that, they made the whole season you can download in one day. Because they realized that these people, you give them half, they'll take the full 6 hours, Nafs. And before you know it, you'll be an old man like me. Those of you who are 20s and 30s, it's going to come so fast. I can tell you openly about myself. So I'm 51 years old. If I go back in time to when I was 20, let's say 20 was when I probably started trying to at least follow deen. 20 to 51, that's 31 years. If any one of you could see, and Allah Ta'ala knows, and you may all get to see it on the Day of Judgment, unless Allah Ta'ala alhamdulillah is as-sattar with me, how much ghafla I must have done in 31 years If I could take that time and put it on deen, I would be Hafiz of Quran, I would be Saba Ashara Qari of Quran, I would be Hafiz of Bukhari. Believe me, I would have studied the fiqh of all the four madhahib. We don't understand what the power is in time. We don't understand. I actually say for 80% of those of us who are 50 plus who are not Hafiz, the reason we're not Hafiz is not because we don't have good memory, it's because if we go back and open up, if we could go back in our book of deeds 30 years, you would find all the time. We had all the time in the world to do it, but we didn't do it. We didn't do it. This is American Islam. This is what it means to be American Islam. Doesn't mean, I'm some enlightened, deep understanding, highly educated person who understands Islam and the world. This is American Islam. That my Islam has been weakened because I have consumed so much of American media content that I have fallen short of my potential in deen. That's called ghafla. Sometimes we even make unwise choices. There was a time in my life when I used to spend hours and hours and hours of sort of, let's say, advising people. One day I said to one of them, probably all this time I've spent the last 6 years with you lot advising you, I could have become Hafiz of Quran. No. It's like, oh, Shaykh, no, we love you. Thank you for doing it for us. And he walked away, and I'm sitting there crying in sadness. I just had this realization. Allahu Akbar. Time. How do you use your time? The first step is to feel the pain. That's all I'm trying to do tonight is that first step. Feel the pain. Look at the word hasra. Yatahassaru. Feel that hasrat now. Feel that remorse, regret, shame, longing now. You don't want to feel that in Jannah. Feel that longing right now. If you're 51, feel it at what you did in year 50. If you're 60, feel it what you did in year 59. If you're 18, feel the longing regret of what you were doing when you were 17. Feel it now. And plug yourself in to some type of intense activity, as intense as you can manage. And even then, push yourself a bit more. This is what they say, right, in modern fitness and weightlifting, that they try to tell you to bench press your max, subhanAllah. And the guy standing over you yelling at you, more, 5 pounds more. Just for the sake of pushing a weight up, you are pushing yourself to the limits, trying to reach your limits. Then you want to expand your horizon. Imagine if we took the same attitude towards deen. Max out on how much Quran you can memorize. Max out on how much Quran you can recite. Max out on how much Quran you can understand. Max out on how much hadith of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam you can learn. Max out on how many sunnahs of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam you can practice. Max out on how many virtuous behaviors you can adopt. Max out on deen. And again, if you don't plug that in, if you don't live a lifestyle and have an attitude that you want to max out on deen, automatic default, there's no middle ground. Automatic default, you will end up maxing out on dunya. And that's what most of us do. So maybe we are students, maybe we work 9 to 5, whatever it is, and the rest of the time, we max out on dunya. If a person likes sports, he'll watch that sports the maximum, as much as he can. He'll follow his team as much as he can. If a person likes to watch TV, they'll watch TV as much as they can. If they like to surf the news, they will surf as much as they can. As much, maxing out on dunya, instead of maxing out on deen. So what does that mean? That's a maximal ghafla. It's not a moderate ghafla that we're in, that, oh, Shaykh, be light on us, a little bit of ghafla, I'm only human, I'm only insan, khulukal insanu da'ifa. Even people quote Quran back at you. Allahu Akbar. But that's not what we are. We max out. And we don't even realize it. All right. The second part of the hadith, كُن فِي الدُّنْيَا كَأَنَّكَ غَرِيبٌ وَعَابِرُ السَّبِيلِ. That you are a traveler on the path. This is a very exceptional way that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam explained to us what our life on earth, hayat dunya, is. We are traveler, wayfarer. It means nothing to us. It's like when you travel through an airport transit lounge, you don't care what's in the airport. You don't walk around the terminal saying, oh, I need to look and see all the shops and everything is in the terminal. And you don't care because you're just passing through. You're not interested. You're not attracted. I want you to just imagine what it would be like. What type of moment is that? Like, just imagine, have hasrat. So this is the second thing. Another thing is to have hasrat for a higher life. What would that life be like if I came home from my studies and work and actually had no attraction to my screen, to my phone, to the internet, to this? What would it be like? What type of life would that be? That I found all of this to be stranger, ghareeb, I viewed all of this, I'm just passing through. It would be a beautiful life. It would be a noble life. It's in our deen what is called zuhud. Sometimes they call it asceticism. Now, today you can call it minimalist living. Minimalist. And again, what we were doing, we are maximalist in ghafla. So it's actually a very extreme thing, and this is why I'm sort of intensely stressing on this, because I think a lot of us, we don't realize the extreme extent to which we have fallen into this. And again, I feel that this is one reason why when Ramadan comes, but then it goes, why do we go back to what we are, right? Because mashallah, the type of people who would come to a program in a masjid, it's not that they're deep sinning and okay, they stop sinning in Ramadan, and Ramadan ends, they go back into haram. You don't go back into haram, you go back into ghafla. This is what's happening. Do you understand? Look at your own life in the last, just take 1 to 3 Ramadans if you want. Don't go very far. What happened? And people say this, that I changed so much in Ramadan, I get so much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Ramadan, and then I go back to who I was. What do you mean by go back to who you are? Was it some sins that you were doing that you returned to? You said, no, alhamdulillah, I don't do sin, and I wasn't sinning before Ramadan. Yes, Ramadan came, maybe I was a bit better in my behavior, but I'm not saying I went into some deep life of sin. So what do you mean then when you say you went back to who you were? And you don't, this is the conversation I'm trying to get you to have with yourself, right? What it means is, I went back to all this ghafla. That's all it means. This is the problem, this is the diagnosis of what's happening to us in Ramadan. I went back to my same old ordinary Joe life, in which at that moment there's no difference even between me and the person who doesn't have iman. He's also looking at the sports and I'm also looking at the sports. There's no difference. So this is why Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it's interesting because that hadith is so oftenly narrated. I think all of you know this hadith that I mentioned, right? Be in the world like a stranger, like you're traveling the path, right? But how many of us live a life like that? I explained once before here that when Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said this to Sayyidina Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala an, it didn't mean that Sayyidina Abu Huraira writes it down. This is the answer to why people say, why were hadiths written down? Because it wasn't dictation class. And if Sayyidina Abu Hurairah had done that and said, okay, I brought it, Rasulullah, I brought your words written down. Kun fi dunya kana ghariba. The Prophet said, Abu Hurairah, put this down. But don't bring me a piece of paper on which my words are written. Bring me a life that is lived according to the teachings I teach you. Bring me the sunnah lifestyle. Don't bring me a dictation hadith. But that's what me and you are. We know the words. We have inherited the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The words were just a medium to inheriting his sunnah lifestyle and approach and attitude and feelings. Kun fi dunya ka'annaka ghareeb wa wabir sabil. Be in this world like a stranger or a traveler on the path. All right, this is my list, but I think I already gave you such a heavy dose. I made the contemporary list, but I said a lot of that. I'm going to do the classical list with you now. The way the classical ulama, hardcore deen, siddiqeen, salihin ulama, how they understood this concept of ghafla. So they took a term, they called it za'id anil zarura. In English, this would be called superfluous. beyond what you really truly need. Extraneous, extra fluff. They call all of that ghafla. Za'id anil darura. Because actually there's a hidden lesson in there. They viewed the dunya as something that you engage in at the level of at the level of necessity. Right? As they say, al-daruratu yatakaddaru biqadri darura, that which is necessary will be deemed necessary only to the extent necessary. So they call anything and everything beyond that ghafla. That's very intense, right? Now, again, I'm not saying me and you can live by this, but we can be inspired by it. You know, sometimes there's a child of yours who comes home and says, oh, I learned something in physics class, and they told me about the Nobel Prize physics winner, astronomer who discovered this. And what do? You get happy that he's getting excited about science. You don't sit him down and tell him, sit down, you're never going to win the Nobel Prize, forget this. So I'm giving you Nobel Prize. Ulama who study Zuhd. Don't tell me, oh, forget this is too intense for us. I'm sharing this with you so you get inspired. At least we do shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I might not be that one, but alhamdulillah, you did raise people from this ummah who did live by this hadith, who did understand this hadith, who did try to guide us on this hadith. At least I make shukr to Allah, I'm a member of an ummah that had people who talked about this. So that's why I want to share with you how they talked about this. Za'id anil darura. Okay, I'm just going to read the contemporary list to you just for the sake of it, and we can talk about it more as the weekend goes. Contemporary ghafla, movies. Number 2, TV, Amazon, Netflix. Number 3, celebrities, actors, awards, following and knowing their lives. Number 4, sports, watching and following teams, players, stats, championships, leagues. Fantasy football league. Look, fantasy. Look, it's not even real football. It's fantasy. They were PhD students at Princeton. They were playing fantasy football. And they asked me, I said, I don't know what you're talking about. No, fantasy. News junkie, 24-hour news channels. How many 24-hour news channels are there? If anybody is from Pakistan and India, look at those talk shows and politics analysis. You don't need news 24 hours. I'm of that generation that CNN was born in my lifetime. And I remember we thought, who needs news 24 hours? What's this concept? Who needs news 24/7? Okay. So news, so many aspects of it. News channels, talk shows, newspapers, magazines. Hobbies, it might be fashion, decorating, cooking, curtains, upholstery, right? Clothing, cars. This one I love to tease you on. Cars and models and this and that. It's attractive. You're driving a Honda, but you know a little bit about the Mercedes models. Yeah. There's no hope of ever driving a Mercedes your whole life, so the best you can do is look at the models and know a little bit about the, cars. Computer games. Allahu Akbar, this is, azab on the younger generation. These video games, the Minecraft, it drives me up the wall when I see it on the screen. The Minecraft, the what is it, something with the B, builder blocks, bros, I don't know what it is. Huh? Yeah, Roblox and bro, it's something with a B, all right? Huh? Subhanallah. I don't know what it is, but I'm just shocked that in the whole bayan, the only time the audience participated was on this topic. It's very revealing. It's very revealing. Subhanallah. YouTube videos, shopping, purchases. Even closer, I feel like I'm screaming on it. Okay. I'll stop here on the YouTube videos. Now I want to tell you something. Even if you're watching, now listen to this very carefully. Even if you're watching high quality YouTube Islamic content, be that whoever the speaker institute may be, Even if you're watching high quality, sincere, beneficial Islamic YouTube content, even there can be too much of a good thing. Why? Because you can't just consume. You have to practice. You can't just keep binge watching season 3 of X Institute's Ramadan special, right? You can watch it if it inspires you, it changes you, then pause it, then go do something. Do something with the feelings. And this is a strange ghafla that has come in us, that we are passive content consumers. And just think of it like this. If the amount of the Islamic content that you watch on social media goes up, the amount of your Islamic practice, knowledge, and feeling has to go up correspondingly. But if you find yourself in a situation that, okay, alhamdulillah, very good first step, then rather watching other types of fluff or doing other types of things, you are doing Islamic surfing, YouTube content consuming, and that keeps going up and you do hours and hours and hours of it, but it doesn't translate back into any practice, action, and change in you, then there's a danger that even this is becoming a lesser form, but nonetheless of ghafla. It's just like when you eat. You take calories, but you need to burn those calories. And if a person, I keep eating, but I don't walk, I don't exercise, but I keep eating, they're going to become obese, right? So the same thing you're consuming. This is the word they use. They use the word consume. I'm not using this word. They use the word consume. You're consuming YouTube content, but you're not practicing deen. You're not burning those calories. So Imam and Shaykh so-and-so is, mashallah, providing you content, giving you calories on YouTube, and you're not burning it. Allahu Akbar. So maybe, and they're doing and thinking that you're burning it and getting them some sawab. So for their sake and your sake, skip an episode, show up in the masjid and 1 hour recite Quran. Say, it's okay, I don't need to watch episode 27. All right, so I did the contemporary list, the classical list. The classical list, Za'id an al-Dharura, and they talked about the most basic things in life, nothing even that I told you. So they start, number 1, with eating. They call it qillati ta'am. Don't eat too much. This is the hardcore training. They're not even thinking about surfing and screen and scrolling. They say to eat. Do not eat Za'id an al-Dharura. Don't eat. Sunnah of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You all know this, right? 1/3 of the stomach is what? 1/3 of the stomach is what? Well, all know this hadith. Go to the MRI and see what's in your stomach. I don't know, CT scan, whatever it is. None of us are going to come out clean. 1/3. Stop eating when you still feel slightly hungry. They were hardcore. We had masters of this in our tradition. It was narrated about one of the early Arab Sulaha, that he once, he took some flour and he baked some bread, and he calculated that the time, not in seconds, minutes, watch, he calculated how many times you could say Subhanallah in the duration it was required to cook the bread. He said, forget it, from now on I'm just pouring the flour in the water, stirring and drinking it, and I can increase my saying of Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar Kabira. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Alhamdulillah, I'm happy to be part of a ummah that there were such people. Maybe if we love them and we are inspired by them, Allah Ta'ala might have some mercy on us also. Eating. Number 2, sleeping. Qillati manam. Now everybody's finished. They're gone. They're all gone. The whole masjid will flee. If I didn't lose you at eating, Za'idan, do not sleep more than necessary. It's actually people who think like this who are able to pray tahajjud salah. It's people who live like this who are able to recite lots of Quran. They would not sleep more than necessary. And you and me, it's a weekend, we even get up, right? So we get up, we come for Fajr, you go home, you take your nap, you get up, you're like, well, what is it? Oh my gosh, it's only 8:30. Going back to sleep. Your natural body clock, you have to be a doctor to understand this. If you physiologically woken up on your own at 8:30 on Saturday, after having prayed Fajr, came back and did the post-Fajr nap, you can get up. But we like to lounge. We love it. We like to lounge, snuggie with the blankets, stay under the covers, right? These people, Allahu Akbar. They might, I'm sure, many of the Salihin of the Sunnah may have never slept after Fajr their whole life, or slept after Fajr for 10, 20, 30 years of their life. Third, Qillat kalam. Don't talk more than necessary. Za'id an darura. Don't talk more than necessary. They will not converse. They will not talk to each other. He said, look, there's nothing beneficial to talk about. We just make ibadah, do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do something productive, go help the poor. There's no need for conversation. Allahu Akbar. Ajeeb. Number 4. It's called Qillat ikhtilat. They say we will not, it's slightly similar to talking. We will not intermingle and interact with people. Excessive chilling, hanging. These are terms from my time. I don't know what you guys call it now. Right? Za'id anil darura, hardcore. And the 5th and final of the classical thing is minimize one's worldly possessions. This is the one where the non-Muslims have picked up Marie Kondo, minimalist living. They're all over this one. Minimize your worldly possessions. They used to have 3 pieces of clothing. One I'm wearing, one might be in the wash, and one is there in backup. That's it, 3. They actually write this. And they make the list of worldly possessions, and they tell you what is that which is necessary, and anything more is extra. When it comes to clothing, 3 sets of clothing. That's it. Whatever you wear, 3 of these, 3 undershirts. They could put their whole life in a suitcase, other than the books. Everything other than books can fit in one suitcase. Za'id an darura. MashaAllah, look at our walk-in closets. There was closet, and then we kept doing it. It made walk-in closet. And I won't tease the sisters, but MashaAllah. Allahu Akbar. Look at these people. It's our deen, our tradition. Why were they doing it? Not because they were extreme, because they understood. They wanted that falah. Their lives and these teachings were tafsir. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. This is how they understood it. This is how they lived it. We should be inspired by that. We should be motivated by that. And this year in Ramadan, insha'Allah ta'ala, to the barakah of fasting, barakah of taraweeh, barakah of coming to the masjid, we can trim as much of the fat as possible. And then after Ramadan, plug yourself in so you remain connected to some dini activity program, so you don't let yourself get plugged back into the dunya. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us from everything that is haram, everything that is makruh, all of the ghafla, all of the lahu. May Allah ta'ala make us live lives according to every hadith of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam. May Allah ta'ala make us gharib in this dunya. May Allah ta'ala make us as if we were travelers on this path. May Allah ta'ala forgive us. May Allah ta'ala erase from our mind all of the thoughts that we had and all of the images that we saw on all those screens and all those movies and all those shows, so many decades of our life. May Allah Ta'ala erase from our heart all those feelings that we felt that were inspired not by Quran Kareem and Hadith, but feelings that were inspired by those screenwriters, script writers, ad designers designed to make us feel things. Allah Ta'ala, we make tawbah from all those feelings. Ya Rabbi Kareem, we ask that you protect our nafs, that you purify our nafs. Allahumma aati nafsi taqwaha wa zakkiha anta khairu man zakkaha anta waliyuha wa mawlaha. Ya Allah, we ask that you grant our nafs a purity and a piety. We ask that you are truly the best of those who can purify it, because you are the master and caretaker and guardian of it. Ya Allah, we make tawbah for all the ghafla that we did in our life. We sit in front of you in shame, Ya Rabb, of how many moments, seconds, days, months, years of our life We have just wasted in a futile way. Ya Rabbi Kareem, give us tawfiq to value our time, honor our time, respect our time. We want to use all our time for you, all of our hearts for you, all of our mind for you, every bodily strength for you. We want to live for you, die for you, rise for you, sleep for you. We want to become your ibad, Ya Rabbi Kareem. Grant us a complete and absolute submission to you. Ya Rabbi Kareem, protect us from every fitna, protect us from every fasad, protect us from every fisk and fujur, protect us from every trial and tribulation, from every horror, from every shamelessness, from every baseness. Ya Rabbi Kareem, you granted us a deen to raise us, Ya Allah, and we have lowered ourselves and abased us, Ya Rabbi Kareem. Forgive us, Ya Rab. Send your rahmah on us, Ya Rab. Send your hidayah on us, Ya Rab. Make us strong mu'mineen, sincere mu'mineen, successful mu'mineen. Grant us all of the sifat of the mu'mineen, Ya Allah, Ya Rabbi Kareem. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على حبيبه سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأمته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
We do request the brothers to stay seated for just a moment. Inshallah, the women's food will be in the old masjid building. So if the brothers could just stay here for a second, inshallah, give the women a head start so they can go to the other building. And then inshallah, in just a few moments, I'll announce for the brothers to take their own dinner. Inshallah. In the meanwhile, please be sure to benefit from the bookstore. We have a selection of books. And if you haven't been able to register, please do scan the QR code. It takes 2 minutes. Please register just so we can get numbers right for next time, inshallah. There is dinner and chai outside afterwards, so inshallah the sisters can go and benefit and go to the whole building and wait for the brothers. The brothers can just wait for just a few moments. There is a bookstore on the sister side as well on this right wall. There's a bookstore on this right wall, inshallah, for the sisters as well. After dinner, there will be a Brothers Care program starting exactly at 10:15. So from 10:15 until 12:30, there will be a Brothers Care program. This tomorrow morning at Fajr, there will be a community Fajr program open to brothers and sisters, and we'll have breakfast afterwards, inshallah.
मैं अभी वर्जीनिया से मूव हूँ
हाँ
साल 1.5 साल पहले
अच्छा
वो
किस जगह में थे?
मैं आरडी में तो मुफ्ती साद आपको सलाम बोलते थे मैंने मुफ्ती साद को
कौन सी जगह पे थे?
आरडी
हार्डली
ALDI ज़करिया मस्जिद मुफ्ती साद को आप जानते हैं ना मुफ्ती साद अहमद न्यू जर्सी में वो उन्होंने वहाँ से इफ्ता किया है साउथ अफ्रीका से
अच्छा माशाल्लाह
वो आपको सलाम बोल रहे हैं और आप कैसे सब ठीक
आप
है
यहाँ आके
मैं अब यहीं
सेट हो
हूँ
गए
जी बस
एक
अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह
साथ ही आए जो वर्जीनिया से काफ़ी पहले हम सनाव लगा आप सेट हैं
मैं तो अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह मुझे साल हो गया तकरीबन
ओके आप किस में बराबर
सलीम नाम
सलीम और पाकिस्तान में किस जगह से?
कराची से
कराची में किस जगह?
मैं पला पड़ा हूँ नाजवात में
हाँ जब मैंने भी पुराने ज़माने में दाऊद इफ्तार 4 नंबर में
जी, जी,
4
जी,
नंबर में सब
फिर मैं नॉर्थ नाजर मूव हो गया था
ठीक है
फिर मैं यहाँ पढ़ने के लिए आ गया था कनाडा
अच्छा।
कनाडा से फिर US
अल्लाह बरकत दे।
बहुत अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह आपने
पाकिस्तान बचाएं
जज़ाक खैर जगाने का दुआ अल्लाह के
अल्लाह बरकत दे।
Assalamu alaikum.
वालेकुम अस्सलाम व रहमतुल्लाह।
I hope you guys know